Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to call our Nash County Commissioners meeting to order for January the 22nd. It's our new time at 1:30 instead of 2:30, which we'll be doing each meeting we have in the afternoons. I appreciate everyone being here. It's customary for us to begin our meetings with a prayer by a commissioner. During this time, you're welcome to stand and join us in that prayer, or with the prayer, you're welcome to use the time to have your individual prayer if you like, or you can use the time to have a moment of silence. At this time, I'd like to call on Mary Wells for the invocation and Wayne Outlaw following with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Our Father, we come to you today. This is an exciting time today for Nash County. God, we've sent one of ours to Raleigh to represent us, but God, we're bringing one of yours back in to represent Nash County here. And God, we just ask you to be with both of them this year, Lord, as they're both learning new positions. But God, we know they're going to do what's right in your sight and what's right for the citizens. And then, God, we just ask you today, we have to ask you to pray on our city. Pray on Rocky Mount, Lord, that they can get their things together, God, that we can move forward and things can go on. And God, we just ask you to be with each one of us. And may we realize that we represent the whole county and not just one person. Just be with us now. Forgive us for the time we failed. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Would you join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Wells, I want to thank you for that words in your prayer. They were very appropriate for the time we are in, and I greatly appreciate the things you had to say.
I'm very concerned, and I'm sure as the rest of us are.
Well, I also appreciate your comments about the two ladies we have in new positions as well.
We know they're going to do a wonderful job.
We are now on item number 4, which is a vote of the Nash County Commissioners to fill the seat for District 4, which is currently vacant. And what I'm going to do, if it's okay with everyone, is just read the letter that we got recently from the chairman of the Republican Party, Mark Edwards. And it simply says, I am pleased to let you know that Nash County Republican Party Executive Committee met tonight and passed the following resolution unanimously. The Nash County Republican Party Executive Committee hereby recommends Sue Leggett to the Nash County Board of Commissioners to be appointed to serve in the vacant seat for District 4. The committee believes Ms. Leggett will be a great addition to the board and will serve the citizens of District 4 and Nash County in its entirety with diligence and distinction. The committee hopes and trusts the board will accept our recommendation and appoint Sue Leggett to the board in the very near future. At this time, I'd open the floor up for a nomination to follow the recommendation of the Republican Party.
Mr. Chair, I make a nomination that we accept Sue as the new.
I have a motion by Ms. Wells. Mr. Outlaw, is it okay if I take Mr. Bellfield's second? Mr. Bellfield's second. Is there any questions to that motion?
Go ahead, please. No, we didn't have anything planned.
We did not. I'm needing any questions to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by a like sign? Seeing none, Ms. Leggett, pleased to announce you the new commissioner for District 4. And if you're prepared to, I'd like to have our Superior Court judge, who we are very pleased to have with us this afternoon, Judge Sumner, if you could come forward and Sue, ever how you wish to do it, bring your family with you, or whatever you wish to do, ma'am, it's your pleasure. Judge will lead you right through it.
Do you, Sue Leggett, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States?
I do.
And do you, Sue Leggett, do solemnly and sincerely swear that you will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina and to the constitutional powers and authorities which are, may be established for the government thereof, that you will endeavor to support and maintain and defend the Constitution of said state, not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States, to the best of your knowledge and ability, so be God?
I do.
And do you, Sue Leggett, swear that you will well and truly execute the duties of the office of the Commissioner of Nash County according to the best of your skill and ability, according to the law, so be God?
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Miss Leggett, you're going the wrong, oh, you coming up here, okay, I thought you were going back and sit down. Scared me to death there. If I could, while, Commissioner Leggett is taking her seat, I would like to just, have the members, I see several members of our GOP Executive Committee in the office, in the, audience. Of course, they were involved in this vote a couple of weeks ago, as well as Commissioner Combs, myself, and Commissioner Outlaw. But if y'all would stand just a moment, I'd appreciate it. The ones that are on the executive committee, we appreciate your work on this. And Mr. Edwards, I'd like to say I think you did a great job of structuring the procedure by which we followed that night. It was a task that we had to work through, but I thought you had the rules in great shape, and it flowed very well. And I appreciate everyone's effort in getting this done for us as quick as we did. What is today, the 22nd? So we did it in 22 days, when we had 60, so we didn't use all the time we had by a long shot. But thank y'all for being here. Got your badge on. I'm going to ask you if you would to introduce your family you had with you.
Okay. Today I have with me my husband Brent and my two sons, Colin and Carter. My parents, Tom and Sarah Thurman, are here as well, and my mother-in-law, Kay Leggett.
Glad to have y'all here. I know each one of you are mighty proud. Sue, anything else you'd like to say before we start in the agenda?
I'd just like to say that it's a real honor to have this opportunity to serve as county commissioner. I really look forward to working with my fellow commissioners, the different departments in the county, and just what opportunity it is to represent the citizens of Nash County.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to apologize ahead of time. I know I will occasionally look down there and call you Lisa for a few months, and I apologize for that. I'm sure you won't mind that too bad, but it takes me a little while, as we all know when we get in the senior years, to make adjustments in life, but we'll learn it pretty quickly. Just correct me when I do that. We are now moving down the agenda on item 7, and if it's okay with the board, I'm going to switch the item 6 and item 7. Mr. Outlaw, if that's okay with you, I think we have a time constraint with the Cloudwise people getting back to Wilmington at the appropriate time. So at this time, Patsy, are you going to introduce them, or are you going to turn them loose? How are we going to do this, ma'am?
I'm going to turn them loose for the first part, and then item number 8.
Right. Okay, great. Sean, welcome back to Nash County. I know you're coming a whole lot, but pleased to have you here today.
I appreciate you guys having us here and having me here. And we've really enjoyed working with each and every one of you through this entire process. Today I wanted to use this time to give everyone an update on where we are and some of the happenings that we have, and obviously answer any questions that you all may have.
And for the citizens in the audience, this is a presentation on our, hopefully what will end up being our countywide broadband. We are in a phase where we are doing a couple of test areas in Nash County. We chose probably the most severe areas to serve, and just want to make sure that Sean and his company are going to deliver exactly what they said they were. There's no doubt about that, but I think he appreciates the time to have a test area as well to perfect it before we turn it loose countywide, and we're real close to getting that, and some of the board has worked on for a very long time, and we're all looking forward to getting this for our citizens throughout the county. Thank you, sir.
Excellent, thank you, and congratulations on your position, too.
Thank you.
I presume that you guys can all see this. This is a site that we created, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But ultimately, this site is now published, and we've had it live for about 2 months now, so that individuals can actually go on to the webpage and actually fill out a form giving us some information, but also allowing us to eventually come on site and actually do some test studies with them. This is a bit of an agenda of what I expect to go over today. I wanted to give you guys an update on where we are on the current project. I want to go over the tower determination process, the infrastructure that's put in place, which is we call our NOC, but it's ultimately where our network equipment is, and then the addition of a Wi-Fi zone that we've lit up, and why we've done that. And then moving forward, I wanted to go over what kind of the next steps are in order to get to the point to where we have actual constituents on the network and utilizing the service. So as I mentioned earlier, we launched the website on 11/14, and our goal was to get current live data. We have a lot of data that's been captured over the years, but we wanted to get actual data based on the individuals that are in the northwestern and southwestern corridors. Since 11/15, we've gotten about a little over 300 people that have actually been to the site, and about 150 of those that have actually completed and filled out the form, which to me is pretty impressive over just honestly a couple months that it's been live. One of the major milestones that we had within the building of the network was to complete what we call our NOC build-out. The county has effectively delivered the 100 meg of internet access. That will be just free access while we're in this initial phase. We have a connection then back to the location where our equipment is, which is the building just adjacent to the county building. And then we've sent that service that ultimately goes through all of our equipment. We've sent that back up to the county building, and now we're currently broadcasting that service of our first client, which is actually Stony Creek Park. One of the reasons that we wanted to actually use that as a milestone was to actually be able to prove and actually, so that you guys could actually see the service working and functioning. Versus just us saying that the service is live. And so we've sent a signal. We worked with, Patsy helped dramatically, and we worked with the city of Nashville to establish a place within the park that we could bring our service to. And that's been established as of the last week. And then we are rebroadcasting that as an open Wi-Fi network for the park itself. Obviously, there's other things that we can do with that network once it's there with the city in the future, but for now, it's just ultimately a Wi-Fi zone that the public can connect to. Additionally, we created a landing page that should be live this afternoon, so that ultimately they can accept the terms and conditions associated with that part. And I invite, if anyone can make it down there, to check it out. So the next steps for us ultimately when we look to do a build out, same thing that we've done in our area, is there's different technologies for different locations. In some places you have an open area and there's not very many trees and we can use a certain type of equipment. And then in other areas where you have more obstacles and those sort of things, you'd use a different type of equipment for those. One of the things that we've done with Nash County is work with a company called Telrad, which produces some LTE gear. It's just a technology, I'm sure everyone's kind of heard of LTE with their phones. But we've actually been able to leverage a spectrum that has just recently opened up, which gives us higher throughput and better coverage than a typical equipment that most of the providers that use. And that has been approved through the FCC for us to be able to use here, which is very good. timing of everything has worked out really well, and these are a couple of the other providers that we're working with on the hardware side. The next side is the tower build-out. It's kind of what we're all really waiting for here. And so I just wanted to kind of define what we consider backhaul. So backhaul, as we explain it, is really the connection point between our towers. So from tower to tower, or from tower to the building back here. We had originally proposed using fiber at those two towers that we have in the northwestern and southwestern corridors. But when all the pricing and all the construction that came back with actually getting fiber there, we kind of went back to the drawing board and looked at other ways that we can do that more efficiently. And so we had put together a proposal, which I believe Miss Patsy will talk to you guys about, and ultimately to lower the cost of being able to get service out there. And so we're kind of going back to the original plan that we presented initially for the entire project. And so we will be actually hopefully using that technology, which is actually a lot faster and better ultimately at the end of the day. In doing that, we will be bringing on a third tower to make that happen. So ultimately that service will get repeated to that tower, and then from that tower we'll actually have a connection point to each of the areas. One of those is about 5 miles and one's about 7 miles that we're actually sending this service over. Our goal originally was to get about 100 meg to these locations. We've spec'd this out to be able to do between 400 and 500 meg, so about 4 times faster than we originally planned on. And then this is the component, really, and this is about the end of this, but this is the component to where we actually go from those towers, so that's kind of the infrastructure or the backbone of our network. And this is the point to where we actually go from the towers to the actual end users that are out there. And so what we've done is we actually work with the that company that I was talking about, Telrad, or the hardware manufacturer, to create what are called heat maps. And so we ultimately plotted all the people that had responded back to us from that survey that we did on that form online. And that's when we actually picked the actual site locations that are out there. And so we've picked those 2 locations, and then what we do is we have these heat map studies, which actually simulates that type of technology, the terrain, and the individuals that we're going after to determine what technology we'll use in order to service those areas. We also flew in an actual engineer from one of those locations. He came down just before the Rural Center meeting, and ultimately we created all the maps and did all the survey studies. At this stage, the tower applications for those with the tower companies have been submitted, and they're being reviewed right now. And then we'll go through ultimately with the local area to get all that permitting actually pushed through. Our goal is that we'll actually start the implementations towards the latter part of February. And then we'll begin testing ultimately towards the end of March. This is just a quick map. So this is the simulated heat map that I was talking about. And I'll share this with you guys if you don't have it, but that also has the dots or the individuals that have said that they either don't have service or have service that they're not happy with right now. So this is actually a really positive result. So the next step, once the actual equipment's live, is we'll actually do actual surveys with equipment to determine our coverage area, our actual coverage area. And then this is the southwest area. And so as you can see, those studies show a good portion of the individuals that have responded of being in the coverage area. And then ultimately, lastly, this is kind of the current timeline of where we're at. We expected this to take about 3 to 6 months. A couple things happened to put us a little bit behind, but I still think we'll be in the under the 6-month mark ultimately. The big milestone that really you can see there would be in towards the end of March is when the actual towers should come online and be live, and we'll actually start doing our field studies and have individuals connected back to the network. met pretty much just about every month with the committee. I think this is the only month that we probably won't meet in February, but then we'll reconnect in March because that's really when the next major milestone that we'll have coming up. And we had a little hurricane at the beginning of that too, so. And that's all I have for today. Did you all have any questions?
Any questions from commissioners, Mr. Belfield?
I was looking there, you said economics triggered a proposed change in the plan.
Yes, sir.
What are you referring to, dollars and cents?
It is dollars and cents. I'm not quite sure or how much you want me to go into, but ultimately, it was about an $18,000 difference to go with ultimately 4 or 5 times more speed. And so I brought that ultimately to the committee, and the goal was that if you guys feel that we're moving forward with this in the long term, obviously it makes sense for us to go that route. And then after a few discussions, we ultimately came back and said that we would split that cost with you guys if you decided to go that route.
Is it going to be effective by changing the plan?
No, this
As far
actually,
as service,
excuse me?
as far as service, is it going, changing the plan, is it going to affect that?
It'll make it better ultimately at the end of the day. This is the route we would generally go once we rolled into the more long-term plan with the county. So we would have actually been doing this anyway as we moved forward.
Well, I asked this question, I'm not on the committee, so I was
Okay.
asking these questions, so I have a good understanding what's meant by changing the plan.
Gotcha. Did that help, or?
Mr. Belfield, I think Mr. Outlaw may update you just a little bit when he gets to the committee reports on the change that we made at the last committee meeting. And we do have a small cost to bring to the Board of Commissioners for approval.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just a couple of comments. Could you provide us with a copy of your presentation today?
Absolutely.
And also, could you, when you provide that prior to giving it to us, could you go ahead and update your timeline to show, I don't want you to take off what you had projected. I just want you to lay over that where you actually expect to be at this point. And then when we meet on a monthly basis, if you could just provide us with an update as we meet, and we can just see how we're progressing against the original plan.
Absolutely.
And the third point I'd like to make is that Ms. McGee will be providing some information that Mr. Davis is speaking to today.
All right, any more questions from commissioners? We greatly appreciate the update and certainly look forward to getting this thing online. I know you are as well.
Absolutely.
Turn
Thank
that
you, guys.
dollar flow around the other way, maybe. Mr. McGee?
Yes, sir. The item I have for you to consider is approval of a broadband program agreement, the First Amendment. I'm sure you recall that in September, on September 17th, the county entered into a broadband program agreement after many years of working on this issue with Cloudwise for a proof of concept, which at this time needs to be amended. The proposed First Amendment, which is also in your packet, includes an additional $21,000 due upon completion of the Network Operations Center. And this figure splits the cost between Cloudwise and the county of the capital improvements that are needed to install the fiber backhaul to the towers. The First Amendment also includes a monthly fee not to exceed $1,500 per month due upon receipt of an invoice from the company with an attached invoice from the tower provider during this proof of concept period, beginning when the towers are turned up, and Cloudwise expects this to last about 3 months. The amendment which was drafted by the Cloudwise attorney, has been reviewed by the county attorney and revised as needed. So the recommended action is to approve the First Amendment to the broadband program agreement with Cloudwise. And the Finance Department plans to ask you to approve a related project budget ordinance next month. I will ask Sean to come up and explain that there were two alternatives presented to the committee, and that there were 3 commissioners at that committee meeting last month. And this recommendation is a result of the evaluation of those 2 alternatives and a decision about which way would be better to go. And so I also want to introduce Ed Slomer, who's also with Sean Olson, who has been working closely with us on this project. Sean, can you explain the 2 alternatives? I know he can do it better than I can.
That's okay. if you don't. No worries.
Yes, I do.
All right. Very
It's in
good.
there somewhere.
Here it
There it
is.
is.
So I had, when this came up, I actually put together a draft agreement. This is pretty much what we would typically do, to try to summarize everything as well as to put our recommendation there, the change. And it does have a bit of a background there, but originally the plan was to get fiber to each of these locations, and we expected that cost to be around $2,500 a month, to give a total for the 12 months, because that's really the minimum commitment that we can do with the incumbent provider that's in the area, which gives us at about a $30,000 annual cost for that service. And so we presented 2 options. So the first option is to just continue as planned and then to present back to you all that the cost isn't going to be $2,500 a month, but rather we'll come back with what the actual cost that that provider has given to us. And we have the hard figures in here, but for today's purposes, it wound up being around $5,000 a month. And $4,000 of that was actually the monthly cost for the fiber itself. So that would satisfy the original plan of getting 100 meg into both of those areas to those towers. But when you do the math on that, it's double, right? So we go from $30,000 to $60,000 for that first year of service. So when that happened, we kind of came back and said, can we do this better? It's kind of what we always try to do. And so we went back to the drawing back to the drawing board, and we looked at what the original plan called for, which was what I was talking about earlier of those wireless backhauls into those areas. And so we went ahead, since we had the towers chosen, we did an actual engineering study to find out how much that would cost to be able to do that. And the total cost came in at about $48,000. It's actually about, it was about $48,000 total for that entire year. So that's where the delta comes from between the original plan of $30,000 and the new plan of $48,000, if that makes sense. And the final, the end of that ultimately is that we would absorb half of that cost and the county would absorb the other half of that cost. And that's where the $9,000 and $9,000 came from.
Thank you, Sean. Pastor, did you have more to add?
No, sir.
Okay.
Recommend action is to approve the amendment as presented.
Any questions from commissioners? Mr. Bellfield,
I was just reading the first paragraph of the amendment. Shouldn't that be September the 17th, 2018, instead of 19?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Second.
Duly noted.
Well, no harm done. It's just, sometimes you hitting the typewriter, you hit
Hit the wrong
thing.
date.
Right.
Thank you.
you really think they did this on a typewriter, Mr. Bellfield?
I just thought before we voted on it that we get the date.
I agree with you 100%. I appreciate you catching that.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the revised agreement as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Combs, there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Bellfield. Any questions on that motion? All in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by a like sign? Motion stands approved. Thank you,
Thank
ma'am. Mr. Outlaw, the next item on the agenda, I'm going back to 6, is North Carolina DOT upcoming project. I think you set this up. Would you like to introduce the person making this presentation?
Well, I would introduce Miss Rachel Evans, who I had the pleasure of meeting a few weeks back, and she will introduce the other members of her group that are with her today. And you kind of lay out like you did for me what you're planning to do.
Yes, sir. Thank you all so much for allowing us to be here today, the opportunity to talk about some upcoming projects in Nash County. We're talking about the roadway widening of Eastern Avenue, Sunset Avenue, and Old Carriage Avenue. We had a public meeting back on December 13th, and I think some people were not able to attend from the county commissioners, and I think some wanted additional information. So Keith Lewis, he is the project manager at VHB. He has been overseeing the planning and preliminary design of these projects. He's going to come up here and present the presentation that we provided at the public meeting. And he'll go through that, and then if y'all have any questions, I'll come back up here and we'll answer your questions.
Rachel, who else you have with you today?
Today, I have with me Keith Lewis from VHB, Elise Mize from VHB, as well as Ronnie Keeter. He's the,
And you're welcome anytime to bring projects to Nash County.
Thank
You don't have to think it's allowing you to come. Come every month if you would.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm going to today give you a quick overview of the projects, the 3 projects that Rachel just mentioned. And I think everybody has it on their screen. We can see this. So the first thing, I'm just going to go through the project descriptions a little bit, and we'll talk about a couple of different concepts that we considered as we were working with this project. So right now, we're in the project development stage. So this will be turned over. We have to prepare an environmental document for this, and we're doing the preliminary designs and as we move through. As Rachel mentioned also, we'd recently had on December 13th a public meeting to show the public and get citizens involved in making comments and talking to them about what we're looking at doing and what our thoughts are at this point in time. So we'll talk about some of the coordination we've done, as well as we have some project visualizations to show you a little bit about how it might look once it's built. So the 3 projects, Eastern Avenue, this is from Red Oak Road over to Old Carriage Road, and this is in the orange on your graphics there. And continuing through Old Carriage is Sunset Avenue and carrying that improvement all the way to Halifax Road. This includes the interchange at I-95 and building that to get a little bit to better access in that area. We're also then taking Old Carriage Road, where it begins as North Old Carriage Road from Sunset and Eastern, and carrying that up to Regis Store and Green Hills Road, that intersection there. So our plan is to improve those to a 4-lane divided facility with a raised median. We'll have a little graphic here in a moment. But also, as we carry that through on North Old Carriage Road, we're going to carry that through the interchange, and then we'll taper that down to a 3-lane there as traffic drops about 50% as we move north of 64 in that area. So, well, this is a description of what I've just said, so we'll move on here to the next one. So the schedule for this project, as I mentioned, we had that public meeting in December. We are preparing an environmental document. This is state funds, so we are preparing an environmental assessment and finding of no significant impact. So this is an environmental document that talks about, that carries us through our process and what we have done, what we have found out there, what are the impacts, with our recommendations and why we made these recommendations. And we talk about traffic, the traffic that we have, that's forecasted for that area. We talk about crash analysis and the severity of that in that area. What's the potential growth in that area? What are our impacts, natural environment to human environment? And we provide all that information as well as all our public and stakeholder coordination that we've done. We provide that in the document with our recommendation. These environmental document, we're planning on having that completed in the next few months. Then we'll be looking at the project to let in the year 2020 for right-of-way acquisition and construction. So the purpose and need is one thing that we always have to identify as well and put in those environmental documents. So what is the purpose? Obviously here on Eastern Avenue and Old Carriage Road is helping to increase that capacity out there and reduce those potential for more crashes and the severity of those crashes that we've seen out there as we look back for 5 years, the past 5 years. And so addressing those safety concerns and identifying that anticipated growth in that area. That's an area that we've seen, especially on the Nashville end, and that area is growing quite a bit. There's been a lot of potential growth, some requests and interest in some of the property in this region as well. So as we look at Sunset Avenue, we have a initiative there to provide some access, better direct access with that interchange on I-95, and based on economic development in that area, and Rocky Mount and in that project area as well. So that's going to provide a lot better access in that area, bringing that in from I-95. So concepts, I mentioned those before. We looked at this when we started working on it. As I mentioned, most of the projects are with a 4-lane divided road. So as we get to intersections, we looked at the conventional, our typical stop signs or traffic signals based on the traffic amount. But we also looked at the alternative of using roundabouts in this area. So we do have one existing roundabout out there as an entrance, one of the entrances there off Eastern Avenue to the community college. So we originally started thinking, obviously, we're going to need to rebuild and that one a little bit. What about another one on the other entrance from Old Carriage Road to the university or community college there? And what about potentially there at the ramps, the new ramps at 64 as those intersections into Old Carriage? So we started looking at both of those concepts. We began having discussions with the stakeholders, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So as we look at a typical 4-lane road, in this case, when we're in that more suburban or busier area, we're not using the medians that we see out on I-95 or US 64. We're talking about ideal, it's a 23-foot wide median, raised median. We have the what we call mountable curb and gutter in the middle. But we tend to do that a lot more now instead of the 5-lane roads that we've seen through the years with that two-way turn lane in the center. That gets confusing when you get busy and a lot of driveways. So as we look at this 4-lane facility here in this divided facility, throughout this, I mentioned the one piece of it north of the 64 bridge and interchange that we'll be tapering that down to 3 lanes. On Eastern Avenue, we're looking at this facility. We're looking at having it as shoulder on the outside. As we come into Sunset Avenue, we're looking at taking that with curb and gutter and also adding a multi-use path on the westbound side or the north side of the road, and on the other side of the road, a sidewalk on that. So a lot of residential areas, through that. A lot of smaller properties, not the agriculture and the kind of light industry and warehousing buildings that we see on Eastern, but a little more dense development in that area. And so providing something in there, that's something that we worked with our local stakeholders here, the City of Rocky Mount, and that was their desire there to share in the cost for that multi-use path and that sidewalk. As we start on North Old Carriage Road and head north of Eastern and Sunset, we are going to grade that for future sidewalk and multi-use path. So our right-of-way will be purchased. It was not able to do cost sharing at that point, but the right-of-way will be purchased. The earthwork will be done appropriately for sidewalk and a multi-use path to come in there in the future. So why roundabouts? So a number of different things that we look at, and in this area in particular, is reducing vehicle speeds, facilitating U-turns. So when we have a median, when we divide that traffic, we have to have places for U-turns, because not everybody's going to be lucky enough to pull out and have that one opening for that stretch of road. So we need a place for them to go, turn to the right, and come back and U-turn. We don't want it to be 2 miles down the road. We'll try to make it where it's very accommodating. But also, roundabouts help promote more of a smooth and safe travel for all users. We'll talk about that in a minute. So if you look at today's road system in this area, we have 64, US 64 and I-95 that are high-speed roads. So what are Eastern and Sunset's just parallel to 64, and we have Old Carriage Road parallel to I-95 somewhat. So we have those high-speed roads, so we don't need, in this area, that development, we don't need those to be high-speed roads as far as Eastern and Sunset and Old Carriage Road. So one of the concerns is, helping that slow down and encourage those less and reduced speeds in that area. So slower speeds. What we want to do is, this does is help provide more time for people to react. So if somebody's pulling out into the road and we have a high-speed vehicle coming along, and then we have a slow one that's pulling out, we start to get that, those impacts. We've got to make some very quick decisions. That difference in the speed is what is a big concern. So with that, we reduce the severity. If we can reduce the speed, if we can reduce the difference in those speeds, we can reduce the severity of those accidents. So typically a roundabout, and several studies have been done based on a typical stop sign type intersection and a traffic signalized. So they range from reducing severe accidents between 78 and 82%. That's huge when we're talking about the severe accidents. You may have some bumps and some scrapes as people are learning to use roundabouts. In this area, I think we have a roundabout, so I think a lot of people have learned and are more comfortable with that. But it really reduces those really high impact and those really severe accidents. So the medians, I talked a little bit about this, consolidating those crossing movements to those specific locations, and establish a need for those U-turn movements. So a roundabout can provide us with that U-turn movement as well. It doesn't provide as much since that roundabout is working both sides of the road. We don't have to have that large bulb out that we see. And if I back up to the Sunset project, had started it by itself as a project a few years ago, and that was shown as some U-turn bulbs in it. We looked at this project and kind of pulled all three of them together and what was the best for all three of these projects. So that reduces that property as well as when we have these large bulb outs just on one side. So we have lower speeds as we come in through that roundabout. So everybody from all the directions is at much lower speeds, typically around 20 miles per hour or so. And so these roundabouts will also accommodate U-turning of any vehicle. And instead of having to estimate what's the traffic in this area, we have a smaller, or how big does that U-turn bulb, we have a roundabout that can accommodate the school buses, the fire trucks, the large tractor trailers, and all types of vehicles in that area. We also want to look at this from, as I mentioned, promoting that smooth travel for all users. So we're not just talking about the cars out there. So in this area, especially as we get into Sunset and on North Old Carriage Road, we're looking at the potential for pedestrians, for cyclists in these areas. So for pedestrians, as we reduce those speeds, obviously then we're reducing it. Everybody is slowing down. So when they go to cross, they're not having to look at vehicles that are traveling 45, 55 miles per hour. And they're looking at them as they have slowed down in that area to 25, 20 miles per hour. And plus we have in the middle, there's an island as you come across just on each end of that roundabout. And so they have a refuge to step in. So they're only crossing one side at a time. So they're looking for traffic coming from one direction at a time, not worried about both directions there. So they have shorter crossings with that as well. So with a cyclist, so somebody that may be riding a road cyclist, and as they come into that roundabout, they have that vehicle slowing too. So it's a more comfortable, their speeds are much closer than they would be coming in a large intersection. They're riding with the flow of the traffic instead of being concerned with somebody pulling out in front of them or somebody coming in at 55 or something like that from a side street. And I've kind of mentioned this several times, it's universally everybody is yielding. Everybody is coming in there. So if we have the trucks, we have the emergency vehicles, we have the school buses, all vehicles and all vehicle types. So everybody is coming into that area, and so we're kind of into that roundabout, slowed down and focusing on one direction of opposing traffic. So I mentioned the coordination that we have done. So back in April of 2018, we began with talking with the Transportation Advisory Committee and talking with them about this. You know, roundabouts are not a cover-all for every project. So we have to look at it and where do we think they are best and what quarters are they best with. And we felt like with these projects, they really fit in well. There's an existing, the existing roundabout. We're trying to slow that traffic down. We have those high-speed roads outside of this area. And we're in a growing area and developing area, so we felt like that was a really good way to do that and a good way to accommodate the U-turns in those areas and limit our impact out to the residents or other businesses with a little bit less room in those U-turns. So we also have met with Nash Community College a couple times and worked there, and they've been gracious to accommodate us with our public meeting. We're actually having a small group meeting with the neighborhood there in the West Street area this evening. And so they've been very accommodating there and good to work with and coordinating with them with their entrances as well and trying to accommodate their traffic and their growth in that area. In September, we again met with the City of Rocky Mount as well, again with the Transportation Advisory Committee. And of course, prior to our public meeting on December 13th, we met with the local officials in that area. Of course, that's why we're here. I know that a lot of you all couldn't make it, and so wanted to go through and give an overview of the project and have everybody has a good understanding of that. So the coordination to date, we received a lot of good input and a lot of good comments about the intersection design and how we do that, and worked with everybody through why we thought that was a good roundabouts were good to use in this area. And we coordinate a lot with the bike and pedestrian facilities, and talked about those and how we work those in. And of course, the access management, that's one thing too, is we bring in a median. We have to work with and really look at the access. Are we providing good access for everybody? Do they have good solutions if they can no longer turn left into where they're going or their home or business? So the comments back we got is in what the concerns were, or what the beliefs were in the area. Safety is important. That's what we heard very clear with the stakeholders. They were really, the interchange was really important to increase that business for economic development in there. And the roundabout concept did align, and this was not the first time we met with them, that everybody was on board with them, but as we talked further about that, they felt like the roundabout concept really aligned with what their goals were for this area, for these roads and these communities and that development in there. So these are some examples on some visualizations on what it might look like when it's built. This is the existing roundabout. Obviously, it would have to be rebuilt a little bit, and as we'll have 2 lanes coming in from each direction off the main roads, and then 1 lane coming in from the community college. This is the interchange with US 64, and we are looking back from across the highway back toward the community college. So we're kind of above what would be the 3-lane section, the less traffic on that piece from 64 up to Regis Store and Green Hills intersection. So we've recommended roundabouts on each end with the ramps here. This has been done on a number of diamond interchanges throughout the state, and it's worked very well. This is what we call, I'll say this is down near one of the proposed ramps for the interchange to I-95, and then offset from that is Freight Road. So we looked at this, and with the offset intersections, how do we accommodate this best? This is what we call a peanut roundabout. So as you can see, it's somewhat shaped like a peanut. Instead of making it a perfect oval, which would give us a straightaway like a racetrack on the longer pieces. So what we do is bring that back in, and so it's given that a little bit of movement and curve to keep that traffic at that slower speed while it's inside that roundabout. And it also angles it out to a little bit better to go to these side streets. So there are several of those that have been built in North Carolina in the last few years. Castle Hayne area heading down toward Wilmington is the first one that comes to mind for me, and they work very well. We had a simulation on this that showed the vehicles moving as in our public meeting, so that this could be seen and how the traffic pattern would work and how it would move. This is on Sunset Avenue, looking back toward Old Carriage Road. And this is the area, the section of the project, Sunset, has the multi-use path that's on the right in the charcoal color. And then on the left side of the road, we have a sidewalk in there to accommodate that. So this is all I have as far as presenting to you, and we are open for any kind of questions you may have or comments.
Before we go to questions, Ms. Evans, I know you had another distinguished guest come in. If you'd like to introduce him at this time.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gus Phillips. He's our board member with DOT from this area.
Mr. Ellis, welcome. Glad to have you, sir. Questions? I'm going to briefly say, do you agree with the statement that the commissioners were not asked to approve this design, and therefore we did not approve this design? Is that a true statement, sir?
That you were not there to approve it?
No, my
Is that what you
question
said?
was, we weren't asked to approve it and therefore have not approved it. Do you agree with that? It's only a trick question. Don't
Trick
bother with
question,
answering.
okay.
Yes, sir. I'm
No,
looking-
I have not asked you to approve it.
Yeah, I'm looking for cover when we open this thing up, that's all. Mr. Belfield?
Yes, we've talked about especially the interchange of Sunset Avenue for several years. And my thinking, why are we doing it? And I know some say economic pull traffic off I-95 and all that, but Sunset Avenue is a busy place as it is right now.
Yeah.
And you got two interchanges there. If you put one there and the one they already have up there, 64, 95, they're not even hardly a mile apart. So help me with my thinking, because I just haven't gotten around to seeing that it's necessary. So maybe you can, I know I've heard some have talked to me about, oh, this is going to improve the economics here. And you're going to see more businesses built here, and that means more traffic. Can we hold it?
So our forecasted traffic shows in the design year 2045, we always look at about 25 or so years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows about 25,000 vehicles along Sunset Avenue at that location. We are doing some improvements on I-95. I failed to mention that earlier. So right now, if you go out on what we call the collector distributor, so if you're traveling on I-95 and you want to get off on 64, you get off into the right lanes as it goes off into that, what we call a collector distributor. It's collecting traffic and distributing traffic into the different roads there off onto 64. So we're extending that all the way down to include the Sunset Avenue interchange. So that will provide, yes, they are close interchanges, and that will provide a little bit better, safer getting that traffic that's coming on and off of to and from Sunset or to and from US 64. That'll pull them off separately throughout that area. So the need, economic development need is the initiative that we were provided. I'm sure that was supported before as a need. I don't know if you have any comments on that and where that came from.
The city of Rocky Mount has been in support of an interchange at that location to open up that southeast quadrant between 64 and 95 to open it up for economic development. And that was by their request.
I will add, Mr. Belfield, this was a project that we did work on for many years. The Gateway Partnership took it under its wing. Mr. Tullis, myself, the mayor of Rocky Mount, and a few others went and met with DOT under the previous administration to try to drum up some support. We started out with a very hard road to hoe, quite frankly, but you got so much controlled access on 95 as well as 64. It doesn't lend itself at that major interchange, what we all build our soul around almost, having I-95, 64, and now the new interchange, interstate interchange 795 coming right into our area, but yet we didn't have but just very poor access from off the road into this area, and that's why it's been so important for retail as well as industrial recruitment, more retail, I'd have to admit, to work on this. And it took quite a while to get wings under it, but finally it did under the current administration and the new TIP program that was adopted. It got moved up quite a bit, and quite frankly, I think we're extremely lucky to have moved it up the number of years that we did. It was in a position where it wasn't even funded for quite a while, and it has kind of amazed me that it has moved up as quick as it has and as far up the list. But I certainly think it's a great thing for the city of Rocky Mount, as well as Nash County, as well as the town of Nashville, to get this done. And the whole goal is to make that more of a commercial area for development. And I'm sure, Ronnie, you can add some more to what I've just said, and Mr. Tullis may want to add something to it as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'm Ronnie Keeter, Division Engineer for this area. And what I'd like to add to that is that also if we put an interchange there at Sunset and 95, it actually takes pressure off the other local roads. It takes pressure off of, if they were to go 64 to Winstead Avenue to get to Sunset, or if they were to go 95 up to Old Carriage Road to get back to this potential development, it actually takes pressure off our local roads and actually probably makes our future design year kind of extends it some. So yes, sir, it does accommodate the growth.
Are you looking at, on Sunset Avenue, all the streets that go into Sunset Avenue in the area? You're talking about maybe a stoplight at each one?
The only signal we'll have is Old Carriage and Sunset within this project. And then the other signal is the existing one up at Halifax Road in Sunset.
Right.
The rest of them are all roundabout, and the history and the studies show that we can move more traffic at lower speeds more efficiently with the roundabout instead of the signal.
Well, I can agree with the low speed. That's needed. But there on Jones Street where the state employees credit union, I tell you, it stays congested. It's hard to get out Jones Street when the light at Winstead Avenue and the one at Inglewood are both working together.
Yes.
And so you got the traffic going every, and I just think that you need to take a look at that.
We will.
And I think need some help there, because I've heard people talk about, say, I just hate to go out through Jones Street and try to get on Sunset Avenue going either way, because those two lights are working together. And if it slacks up on going in one direction, here come the other, and you still can't get out. So that's been one of the driving forces, making me wonder if you put that interchange there, you're gonna have more traffic. And then if so, from Halifax Road out to I-95, it's gonna need to be widened, 4 lane. And it seemed like to me, you're gonna have to take in some of them homes there in order to do that.
Well, Phil, when you look at the total project, I think you'll see all of that is moving out to 4 lanes.
Yeah.
It starts
Well,
actually at Halifax.
I'm not a person that just want to try to kill something or try to stop something. I
Understood.
just want to make sure whatever we do it's in the best interest of everybody, those living in that area, business, and the travelers.
Yes, sir. We share that same concern. That's why we've had multiple public hearings to try to get everybody's input so we get a design that works for everybody.
Mr. Gillis?
Yeah, thank
Welcome.
you,
Welcome,
Chairman
sir.
Davis. And we're glad to be here to make this presentation, and we've got the experts with us. But following up on what Chairman Davis said earlier, how this thing got started, this goes back a pretty good ways.
It does.
And it was almost a pipe dream. And it started out about $30 million, and there was no inkling there was going to be any funding anywhere. In fact, the county and the Gateway in the city talked about, doing private funding. I mean, it was really a pipe dream. And then when Chairman Davis and a few of us went up and met with Secretary Tater at that
Later
time.
at that time, right.
And he was, grew up at Fort Bragg and was very familiar with 95 and very familiar with what was happening down here. He got on board pretty early, and it was still, there was no money available. And then when the STIP, the STIP program, came in, and they put it on the docket as why it was needed and the points that it scored, it really, really moved up the ladder. And we got the Federal Highway Group, they were certainly not encouraging it at first because, like you said, it was so close to the existing 64 interchange. But they got on board and figured out how we could do it, and then when the STIP program indicated that it was a good project, and then when things started changing and money started coming into the DOT, we've got a lot of money now that we did not have before. And all the activity that started going on around here, like said sex, needing, fix that interchange in Gold Rock, and then coming up with the potential what will happen when they do this interchange on Sunset. A lot of things happened. So this thing moved up about, I think it was originally scheduled, Chairman, in 2028 or something like that.
28 is correct, yes, sir.
With no funding. So now it's moved up, and it's, so many things are happening right now. That's why we've got 3 projects in one, this Sunset project going from Little Eastonburg to Nashville, 4-lane all the way. And they combine that, it's going to be design build. Everything's going to happen with one contractor, so it's not going to be one here and one there, and somebody can install it here and there. So it's on a fast track, and I think in 5 years, you're hardly going to even recognize what's happening around here. So, but it started with a dream, Robbie Davis and 2 or 3 others, and we started going up there. And anyway, I congratulate you all on making that thing move. But thank you for letting us be here. And we've got a wonderful crew that's working on it. And these hearings that we're having, we do take into consideration everything. And when those folks make comments, and like Commissioner Belfield or anybody else, they are really listened to, just like the meeting we're going to have this afternoon when we leave here with some of the residents at Western Crossing. There's been a lot of changes since that first meeting, and I think they'll be very pleased because we listen and really are working on it, just like y'all. You hear stuff and you work to make it happen. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr.
Congratulations to our new commissioner.
Thank you.
Mr. Outlaw, I think you had a small concern you
I got
wanted.
2 or 3 things I just wanted to mention, and that particular thing, we've talked about that in advance, Rachel and myself. and
Okay.
So we'll be dealing with that at a later date. But I was just wondering, first I say I support the roundabout concept. They work great for me, and I think everybody will get accustomed to it over time. But when you have your meetings, your public meetings, the roundabout entering into the college is a single roundabout.
Yes.
Are you advising them that these roundabouts, including that one, will be dual lane roundabouts? Because that's a little bit different to maneuver when you get into those.
Yes, we talked about that roundabout, and it's what we call a 2-in-1. So the main line has 2 lanes
Right.
in each direction coming through, and then we have 1 from the side. So it kind of forces, so that, I'll say force, but if you're in the right lane and you want to turn, you can loop right around and turn and not have any
you can
opposing
go up
traffic
through.
at all. the person in the center lane and who's moving has a right-of-way in the roundabout, whoever's in that. And so anybody coming into the roundabout has to yield to that roundabout
I
traffic.
just want to make
So
sure when you're having your meetings that you're kind of explaining that to the people.
we had several visualizations. You've seen some of the still shots here. We had a simulation, which I have on a file I can pull up if you'd like it, at the Peanut Roundabout. But we also have we found a good, in another state where they have a webcam on an interchange that's just like this, and we ran that, and so we had some monitors out where people could come by that station, and we would show that. And it's a great example because it has clearly a school is off the webcam somewhere on one road coming in. There's a tremendous number of school buses coming through. They had pedestrians walking through. We did recorded about a 10-minute clip of that webcam, and it shows how everything coming through there. We've had fire trucks, emergency vehicles, we had people walking through that, and school buses coming through, large tractor trailers, and so it gave a good visual of how it worked and how smooth it worked with all of those, as we talked about a little bit earlier, just all the users that will come through there. And so we had all these simulations, videos, and different things at the meeting where we got them to come through and walk. We did a presentation that was it had audio in it, one of our presentations, and as they came into the room, we kind of gave them an educational about roundabouts, why we chose them, a lot of the things that we've talked about here, and showed some of the simulations and different types of things like that we had inside with, as we were at our public meeting maps. We had 3 different sets set up, and then we had a station with running the video and the simulation. So we were looking at it from an educational standpoint, why it's better. We had some, in some of our stakeholder meetings, we had discussions about that existing roundabout and its design versus the design of what we were doing. There were some concerns about coming through that roundabout, that existing one, and if you have a vehicle coming in, you're coming around, and it for a second or so, it looks like you're coming in head to head. But with the roundabouts that we're looking at, this 2 and 1, we've got a big separation in there. So you won't feel that when you come around this roundabout. You've got an island in between that feathers the vehicles out into that roundabout. So very different from the feel of that single lane roundabout.
Right.
I think this 2 and 1 works really well.
I've had people ask me about 2 of the roundabouts, and from previous meetings that I've had the opportunity to sit in, I believe I know the answer, but just for the general public's information, could you speak a little bit about the roundabout at Camlar and the roundabout at Regency Drive, the need for those 2 roundabouts?
Well, the reason we put them in here, we have 10 roundabouts combined on these 3 projects. So as we first, as I mentioned earlier, we first were in our first meeting about this project, and we started looking at it with a number of different very experienced, specialized people in DOT and elsewhere, and talked about what we want to look at in this project. And the thought at that time, well, let's look at these 3 or 4 intersections and see how a roundabout would work on these, since we have one out there especially. And we did that, and they seemed to work better with the traffic analysis and consistency of that. And then we looked at, well, on Sunset and Eastern, and we've also got to put U-turn balls. So the previous, on Sunset Avenue had been worked previously. They'd had a public meeting. We got comments back, We saw the comments, so there were some areas that were asked to change, and that was some things we were adjusting on that quarter as well. So as we looked at it, I'm thinking, well, if we've got these roundabouts, we've got to provide U-turn areas. And there were originally U-turn bulbs that went out on each side. Well, you're coming in and you still have that high-speed traffic, and then you stop, you pull over into a turn lane, and then you're watching the high-speed traffic come at you so you can go out and U-turn and come back into it. So if we've got 3 or 4 roundabouts in here, what would it look like if all these intersections would be consistent, and we'd have a consistent flow throughout these projects with the roundabouts, instead of a roundabout here, a signalized intersection here, then another roundabout? It just doesn't, you're changing what people are going to be looking for. What is your mind trained as you come through that road to look for? A roundabout, you're looking one direction for cars and vehicles coming in, as opposing so you can get in. At a standard intersection, you may be looking 3 or 4 directions.
The U-turn capability gives you the opportunity, obviously, to make a quick turnaround and get to a
Right.
business. And coming out of Nashville, if you wish to go into Regency Drive, there's a pretty large subdivision there, then you can make a left turn, or you couldn't make a left turn, but with the roundabout, you can maneuver and get into that area. So
Right.
there's some reasons for that. Let me ask you one more thing. Can you talk about funding, and specifically the funding for the multi-use path?
Okay. I will say, let me back
If you
up and
can,
just say traffic operations is another thing we look at roundabout, and how that works. And so the traffic operations sometimes will carry, you're always moving.
Right.
Every direction's always moving. And so more efficient in most cases.
Yeah.
In these cases, it definitely was more efficient.
Rachel, if I could, I probably need to educate our board a little bit, or maybe a reminder, but the DOT came to us at the MPO meeting and talked to us about that multipath and the sidewalks, and it was broke up into 3 areas. Part of it was the city of Rocky Mount, part of it was Nash County, and part of it would have been the town of Nashville. They gave us the option, all 3 of us, to participate in that funding, and then, of course, by participating, it would mean ongoing maintenance for part of that as well. The city of Rocky Mount chose to do it in that area that's in the incorporated area of Rocky Mount. Nash County, as well as the town of Nashville, chose not to do it at this time. I am glad to hear that you are doing the necessary grading, but that's how it came to be. And one of our issues, as well as the town of Nashville, was the ongoing maintenance of it, which we are not set up, and you remember these discussions,
Yes, and that would be my concern.
Right.
So you're just gonna have that graded, it's not gonna be completed?
That is correct. Rachel, please add to my comments if you would.
Yeah, so on Sunset from Old Carriage intersection to almost North Halifax Road, there will be a multi-use path to the north and a sidewalk to the south, and the city of Rocky Mount will be doing a cost participation with that, as well as taking over the maintenance of that. And then on Old Carriage, the city of Rocky Mount wanted to install a multi-use path on the eastern side of Old Carriage between Sunset and the interchange, but right now they cannot take that on, and so that's why we agreed to do the grading at that location. But the Eastern Avenue section, we've not done any right-of-way. We'll not be purchasing right-of-way or doing grading for that, because the alignment, we try to be as conservative in our preliminary design, but with that, we also are trying to minimize all impacts to property owners, and not doing that additional right-of-way decrease the impacts to the residents and the businesses on that corridor.
But that complete route from, I'll say, from the Sheets all the way into Nashville, that total corridor is within the ETJ of either Nashville or Rocky Mount?
Yes, sir. Well, it's no, from that intersection, it's either in Nash County, and then when you, or,
Well, the city limits of Rocky
or
Mount runs to Sheets.
oh, okay, that's
And
a,
so
yes,
you
okay.
go on, don't they have a mile out? And then from Nashville, you got a mile out, is that correct, Chairman Davis?
No, that's not correct, it was correct at a given point in time, but as it has developed into that area, that mile has been decreased every time the
So
city
how much
limits moves out.
ETJ have they got over
I
there?
don't
Do you have
think we
any
got
idea?
hardly any left.
I believe it.
I think it's almost none now, Mr. Outlaw. So what you're saying is correct at some point in time in the past, but the ETJ now is almost totally eaten up by additional annexations, and we haven't granted any additional ETJs
The whole
for many
purpose-
years.
The whole purpose for that corridor is to open it up, and that should certainly spur economic development. And you'll almost join Nashville and Rocky Mount, is what you'll do.
Yeah.
So I would think at some point that you would expect to see those two looking to move out into those areas. I don't know how far they can move out. Okay, I got one final question, has nothing to do with this. It's just a recommendation, and it's probably something that Chairman Davis, sitting on the MPO, is already, you've got on your list. But if you're coming down Winston Avenue headed towards the hospital, where you intersect with Sunset Avenue, can we add a turn lane there so you've got two forward lanes? If you go there any time of the morning or afternoon when the traffic is at its peak, it's very difficult to get through that stoplight in one or two changes, because you've only got one straight lane going through there
You're headed north on,
to the hospital.
you're headed north on Winston Avenue.
That's right.
Gotcha, understand.
I thought they would have done that when they, made all the changes there, but that would be a great improvement right there.
I think we started out with, when we first opened that up, it started out with two through lanes and a right turn lane.
Yeah.
And we found it was holding people up, so they converted to a right turn and a straight
How was
through
it
on.
holding them up?
I don't remember the details of them. I had to think about it just a little bit, but I
All
know
I
we
know is
changed
when
it.
when I
Ronnie,
go there,
you know,
all I know is when I come out of there from church headed to Olive Garden,
yeah,
that I'm gonna sit there for that light to change a couple, 3 times.
maybe you need to pick another restaurant.
Maybe so.
They're getting a little bit hungry.
And that right turn is a free flow movement?
Free flow
So,
movement, right.
so that's exactly what Dave was saying.
I'm not worried.
They converted
The other
it
way,
to
they
free
have
flow.
301.
Wouldn't-
I'm not worried so much about the right turn free flow. I'm worried about the backup on the one lane that's going into actually 3 lanes, but you've only got one lane that's feeding those 3 lanes.
I'll get my traffic guy.
Yeah, take a look at it.
And
Yes,
Sir,
yes,
that's correct.
Yeah,
you've probably seen it.
yeah, we had did a program a while back, and talking about that one lane turn right, and they wanted it to go straight as well. But the engineers were saying, that one person can hold up a whole bunch, but they are re-looking at it, so it's a good time to be thinking.
Well, here's what some people do, and I've seen this more than once. If you're backed up with the traffic for a good distance,
Yeah.
people will go to the right lane and they'll go all the way up to the front, and they'll sit there, when the light changes, boom, they're gone. They jump in front of everybody and they go straight. Yes,
it is.
We'll bring this.
Okay.
It is dangerous.
thank you. Thank you.
Is that
It's
person yourself, Mr. Outlaw, or someone else?
No, sir, I'm way too old, like you reminded me many times, to do foolishness like that.
I guess I asked for that.
But it's,
You did.
it's even tough to go right there
Just,
on Winston
Some people
Avenue.
don't turn right on red.
But even turning right, especially if you're coming out of that shopping center.
I didn't want to tie you up with that, but that's just.
give us one more chance. I need to look this way. Any commissioners got questions?
I've got a question. I know you mentioned in 2019, the
Drum roll.
environmental,
First question, go ahead.
the environmental documents, and then tonight, the meeting in the Western community. What are some of your next immediate steps in these projects?
Our next immediate steps are,
Go ahead.
they're gonna be finalizing the environmental document, and we're gonna begin the design-build procurement process for these projects, as we're letting them in September 2019. And I don't know if you're familiar with the design-build process, but it's a contractual method we use in this state to allow a contractor to pair with a design team. And so VHB has designed preliminary plans, and those will be available with a request for proposal. And then we'll go through a process where a design-build team is selected, and they will do the final design and then the construction. So that's our next steps, is wrapping up the environmental documents and moving forward with design-build procurement. Thank you.
Do you have any more questions? Mr. Combs, do you have a question?
Sir.
Mr. Bland?
No.
Mr. Bland?
Just 3 comments. One, I've been here 5 years and 1 month, and when I got here, this was a pipe dream.
Right.
So y'all been dealing with it for 15 years. The first 10 years, I guess nothing was done, but just in the last couple years, under the last 2 administrations, it's got moved up. We appreciate it, Mr. Tellis, for your help.
What he's really saying is all happened since he got here.
Yeah. I had nothing to do with it, believe me.
Oh, okay, I
Oh, you
misunderstood.
thought I was taking credit.
I did.
Oh,
Go
yeah.
ahead, sir.
Okay, I'll take credit. No. The distribution road concept, if you're going south on 95 and you want to turn on Sunset, you'll take a distribution road before you even get to 64.
Yes.
And vice versa. Okay. And the sidewalk and the bike path on Sunset, is it walking on both sides, but just bikes on one side is what it's intended to be? I know people will do what they want to do.
Well, multi-use path is what's on the, well, westbound side, if you're on that. So multi-use path is for walkers, strollers, running, cycling. So you get a mix, and typically it's a little more friendly for the recreational cyclist, family cyclist, and jogging and that kind of thing.
Right.
And then the sidewalk is on the other side.
Okay, and the sidewalk can that be anything also? Can people, if they're going with the traffic, will they on a bike?
Well, the width is
Well,
half, so it restricts
Yeah,
it
a lot
somewhat.
of places have ordinances that you don't ride a bike on, or skateboard, or now the new scooters, that you don't do that on the sidewalk. So it depends on the jurisdiction as what's allowed. Sidewalk is not meant for cyclists. Obviously, if somebody's taking their kid along and, a little kid cycling and walking along, that
Right.
wouldn't be an issue.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
Well, we greatly appreciate, as you can see, there's a lot of interest in this project. My comments on the roundabout were mainly, we realize we're going, as commissioners, get asked a lot of questions about why we did this, even though we don't do this. You say it will be a total of 10 when we get through all of this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we know what it was like to have one, but our people are better educated and know how to drive a little bit better. We expressed in one of our meetings, it's very important to make sure they're well lit, and Mr. Tullis knows how we feel about that, because that makes a huge difference. But I really want to thank you on the behalf of our board for all the work going into it. We are certainly looking forward to this. It's going to be a lot of pain, as it is on 301 currently. But when it's all over, it's going to be a great improvement in Nash County and that section of the county, and we thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Tullis, anything else? You good?
I may say that the WHIG-CV has did a program this week, last week. We supplied them with the maps, all the maps, and they put them up on the wall.
Right.
And then Clint Williams, has been with us, and he was well versed, but
Right.
he did an hour program on that.
Yeah, I've seen that. It is very good.
Tips that they've gotten on that thing is phenomenal, so there is a lot of interest in it. We
Right.
appreciate them doing that.
Well, we thank you for all your work. I know we've got more work going on in Nash County than we ever have, and I know it's through your efforts that a lot of that is getting done, and we thank you, sir. And we're great to hear you recently been reappointed to your seat for another term also.
I hadn't really made it official like that.
Excuse me, sir. Yep. I'm going to call for a break in just a second. At the request of one of the commissioners, I failed to see one distinguished person we have in the audience when we were talking about our ladies in new positions. And Misty, if you don't mind standing up, I'd like to introduce you, Mr. Strickland, who has been with our sheriff's department, if I remember right, 21, 22 years. Has recently been promoted to a major in the sheriff's department, the first female major we've ever had. Is that correct also? Yes, sir. Okay, and we appreciate you being here today, and I know you're excited, and we're certainly excited, looking forward to working with you. What will you primarily be working on? Is it similar to what Mr. Wooten done, or do you have a different charge?
We split, we have two majors, Dennis Rubin, myself, and I'm over patrol and detention, intelligence, and, Kalia.
Oh, you got a big job.
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
So we've been in the detention facility since I, took my position.
I knew you had been down there.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I do.
But, and so Dennis Rubin is handling the SROs and ZID, and we both work together.
Okay, so you have changed position somewhat from what David Wooten did?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
He's coming back 2 days in February. So he'll, he will handle some other stuff for us for 2 days,
Gotcha.
part-time.
We thank you for being here, and congratulations on your election to that. I kind of kept up with how that took place, and I know you came out highly recommended, and it's great to have you on board. And I know it's an honor to be the first female major we've had in Nash County Sheriff's Department. We will take about a 10-minute recess. Ms. Wells, if that suits you okay. I call us back to order at this time, and we are now on item number 9. And Mr. Outlaw, if I could turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start today with District 1, Ms. Richardson, for committee reports.
Yes, on last Tuesday, I met with the CAC committee with one member, and we went to Breckenridge and Brookdale. Everything was good except Brookdale. We found one safety issue there, and we talked to the administrator about it. He thanked us because he had already reported it, but he said, well, if another report coming from another person would move it up. And so hopefully that's been corrected and everything else was good.
Is that it, Ms. Richardson?
That's it.
Anybody got any questions? District 2, Commissioner Belfield.
Okay, the farmer's market, I believe that's the first one, yeah. Farmer's market. We have updated the proposed market operation guidelines, and I'm not going to read it, but there are a few things in here I might make a comment about. The market manager will conduct on-farm inspections and verification as needed in monitoring to certify the vendors. Vendors selling food items, they must be prepared and cooked off-site and are required to provide evidence of satisfying safety requirements by the Food and Drug Protection Division of North Carolina Department of Agriculture. Anybody violating any offenses, the first offense, 2 weeks market suspension. A second one, 1 month market expansion, and then after that, it's the discretion of the manager of the farmer's market whether to suspend them for the rest of the marketing season. Another key thing that I want to mention is each vendor must display a sign that includes his or her name and business name, address, telephone number, and each vendor selling items other than theirs, unprocessed agriculture items that they actually produce, must also display a copy of his or her North Carolina Department of Revenue Certificate of Registration. And vendors will return unsold products and containers, everything that they have, back to their farm and not leave them there at farmer's market. And there's several other things, but I thought those were some that I would mention, calling to your attention in case if somebody say something about the operation of the farmer's market. And if you all want copies of this, I can see to you getting a copy of it. Upper Coastal Plain Council of Government, no, Juvenile. I hit that one for next. We met last week, and we notified all the participants. There are nine programs that it's time to get their proposals in for the new year, and they're due next month. And then they'll be reviewed, and they will decide whether they will be funded again or not. And they have a funding committee that will work on that. And I will mention this, that during the month of December, there were 17 youth in Nash County that were referred to the judicial system, and only one that was actually I don't want to use the word incarcerated, but anyway, in juvenile detention. And that is the report of that. Upper Coastal Plain Council of Government, it was announced to the board that the Upper Coastal Plain Council of Government, along with 9 other counties, will be studying the situation as it relates to economic development from a manufacturing standpoint, as to people that are available, and to get all this statistics compiled. Then they're going to be looking at training, and the community colleges, along with the workforce development, is going to work on getting these people trained and ready for employment. And this information will also be passed on to potential companies that may locate here in they call it the Eastern Region, with the 10 counties. So it expands beyond the 5. So it's really 2 regions working together. And they are thinking on the state level, maybe cutting back. Right now we have 17 regions, and combining, maybe putting 2 into 1. And how soon that will happen, we have not been told, but that is a possibility. And so they're beginning to work together now with this grant that they have received, and to compile what I just mentioned earlier, and see to it and outline a program. They're working with the community college of First Force Development, high schools, the school systems, in order to get this done. But the grant is to compile all this information and move from there. And I believe Tar River Transit meeting was canceled. We didn't meet in December because, no, I start to say because, but the receptionist and secretary broke her hip, and the notices weren't sent out, and so we didn't meet. And I don't think, not unless it's something that we need to act on, that we won't meet until March, which is end of the first quarter. That's my report.
Any questions, Mr. Belfield? Thank you, Mr. Belfield. Very good report. District 3, Commissioner Combs.
The Health and Human Services Board meeting in December was canceled because of it was Christmas time. And, so they'll meet again in February, regular scheduled time in February, and the Agricultural Advisory Board has not met.
Thank you, Commissioner Combs. District 4, Commissioner Barnes's boards are vacant, and I know that's under consideration right now by the chairman as to who might step in and take those two groups. So unless there's some input from anyone today, we're just going to go over those.
I don't have anyone.
Okay. District 5, myself. We had a meeting in November. We didn't have a mid-month meeting in December, so I left everyone a report from the November meeting. You should have got that. It was a fairly extensive report, a lot of information. If you have any questions on any of it, let me know. The RPO will be meeting in the coming weeks, and the Broadband Committee, of course, we got a report today, and I think we all know where we are with that. District 6, Commissioner Wells.
The Turing Point Workforce Development Board met last week, and one of the highlights was that they got their federal funding so the programs can continue. And the STEP has actually had their retreat today, and that organization is really doing a good job. And maybe later on we can get more information. Thank you.
What
Thank
is
you,
the
Mr.
STEP
Wells.
board? What is STEP?
Strategic Technology Intramural Partnership.
Thank you.
District 7, Commissioner Davis.
Tourism Development Authority, we met on January the 15th. It is our mid-year meeting. We normally just get an update there. We got a real good update from the finance director. We approved our audit for the year. Our income looks very good for the first part of the year, somewhat ahead of even last year. We also had a request, a funding request, which we will take in January. We generally don't get any, but it came from North Carolina Wesleyan College as it relates to something we funded a number of years ago, which is the USA South Conference Championships in the spring. They were able to get those coming back to North Carolina Wesleyan for the next 2 years. They had a funding request jointly made with that and some funding for an indoor tennis facility that they are looking at building on campus that will either have 6 indoor courts or 9 indoor courts. Their request was for $65,000 a year for a 5-year period. I'm looking at Donna. I am correct, am I not? Because I didn't bring my notes. And it was approved by the committee to honor that request, and therefore we will be doing that. Our fund balance is real strong in the TDA funds, a little over $1 million, and we felt like we could handle that, and we knew what the USA South tournament brought to us the last time, and they laid out real well what the indoor tennis facility would bring to Rocky Mount area if indeed they would, when they move forward with that. The shell building, as we reported last month, it is complete. Punch list has been completed, and what we need is a tenant, Mr. Combs, as you well know. We have.
We need a road and some sewage and some water too.
Right, but we need a tenant for that, and then also on the infrastructure that has been awarded, we have our kickoff meeting coming up next week. I think it is, or maybe the following Tuesday week, I believe, is when we have that down at Middlesex. So that project will also take off very quickly as far as getting the water and sewer and roads in there. Gold Rock improvements, nothing went on in December. We're in the process of employing a firm to do the hazardous mitigation, see if there's any asbestos in there, and then we will be taking bids on demolition of the hotel that's owned by the county. The other hotel is in the progress of being demolished, which is the Gold Rock Inn. It's not a pretty site right at the moment, but I think in another 6 or 8 weeks it will probably be completed. I'm not really sure what their timeline is as far as the demolition of that. And then the other hotel where it's closed, I don't have an update on that. Mr. Durham might could add something, but I think it's just basically closed. And kind of in the bank's hands that had the financing on it. The Joint School Board Committee has not met again. If you recall, the previous school board chair asked that we wait till her new members got seated. They have been seated now. We have a different chairman, and I did talk with him late last week. He is going to appoint a new committee to work with us on that, and he intends to do that at his next meeting, and therefore I think that project will get back on track. Mr. Lamb is the new chairman, and we're really looking forward to working with him and whoever he decides to put on that committee. So that's my report. Mr. Outlaw, any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Go back to the TDA, when you talking about the tennis court.
Yes, sir.
I missed, can you kind of go through that again
Sure.
briefly?
They've made a joint request as it relates to the USA South tournament coming, as well as some capital funding for a 5-year period to assist them in the construction of an indoor tennis facility that they intend to do on the campus of North Carolina Wesleyan College.
Okay, because I believe some years back, they constructed the courts they've got for USA participation. Are they talking about enclosing those courts or building new ones, or?
They will be new courts inside of a building. We did help participate in the lighting of the tennis courts through the TDA a number of years ago. And now it has apparently become pretty necessary to have a backup plan. The tennis will be played outside if the weather allows it to, but they've run into numerous situations where they had bad weather. And I think last year they had to go some hundreds of miles away to have that part of the tournament where they were at in Georgia at the time.
Okay.
So that's what they're working towards. But they had a grand scheme that included a lot more for those indoor facilities other than just the USA South.
They've got a building that they can put that in?
No, it is a total new capital improvement project.
Did they consider enclosing what they've got, or?
No, they did not.
Okay.
And my understanding is it's going to be done with a new type construction, which is a air-assisted construction that basically looks similar to what you have at your church for a youth group, but it is totally air-assisted, and it is classified as a temporary structure, which relieves it somewhat in the building codes, allows you to do a lot quicker construction, a lot less expensive construction.
Okay.
It's an interesting project, to be honest with you.
Okay, any other comments? If not, I'll turn it back over to the chairman.
Okay. At this point, we're at any reports or any comments that we wish to make. Mr. Manager, do you have anything you wish to report at this time?
No, sir.
No, okay. I'd open it up for commissioners if you got anything that you wish to add to the meeting. Seeing none, I had a few points. If there's no one that would object, I would like to, in February, give another state of the county. I think we had a wonderful year in 2018. I would, if no one objects, I'd like to do that again, and I would certainly like to hear from each commissioner if you have any key points that you were proud of that you would like to have included in that report. If you could get them to me over the next, maybe by the end of next week, I'd certainly include those in there. Any objection to us doing that again? I think we've got some fine things to toot a horn about, and certainly think we should do that. I would like to report that the water contract that we were working on, I'll let y'all know that I did have a meeting scheduled with a couple of city council people. We had that meeting Friday a week ago. I thought it went real well. I actually picked up the two councilmen. We came out to Dorchers, rode the project, showed them what was going on. They seemed to have a lot better understanding when I dropped them back off uptown, and let me know that they would do their best to have it approved at their next regular scheduled meeting, which would be this coming Monday. So I do hope that takes place. I know it's a lot going on over there, but I do keep your fingers crossed, hope that that does come to fruition, and that will allow us to leave our design on the northern area water contract, just like we have, where we would purchase some lines from Rocky Mount and move our water vault back up to Hunter Hill Road. Committee assignments, as I let the board know, last regular meeting at the first of the month, we have two significant committees that we need to fill. If it's okay with the board, I would like to request or like to appoint, if there's no objection, and I've talked to Mr. Outlaw about this and Mr. Combs about this. What I'd like to do is have just a little bit of time, maybe till March, to permanently appoint someone to those committees. I'd like to give Ms. Leggett time to work with us a little bit, not overload her too much, let her find out a little bit how we operate and see where her interests are, and not make those two appointments right this minute. Mr. Outlaw has agreed, I think, Mr. Outlaw, if you hadn't changed your mind today, am I okay keep talking? That he would be glad to attend on behalf of the commissioners, the hospital meetings for the next couple of months, just to keep us up there. And Commissioner Combs has indicated he would be glad to attend the Trillium Board appointments or meetings for the next couple of months, and then that would give Ms. Leggett time to evaluate what her interest may be in all fairness to her, and then get back with me, and then I would make those new assignments. I do have a couple of other assignments that I wish to make, and one that I wish to change a current member on, but Mr. Belfield, I just would like to get with you sometime this week and talk to you about one of those, if I could, and Ms. Richardson, I'll get with you and talk to you about one of those if I could. So I'm not prepared to, I owe a conversation with Mr. Belfield first before I would move forward with that, to see if he's willing to do what I kind of got in my mind. But if that's okay, anybody got any objection to that, working it that way? Okay, and Mr. Belfield, I'll call you and get with you shortly on that.
Okay.
Chairman, just a question
Sure.
on those temporary committee assignments. Or I assume that the hospital board and the Trillium Board are gonna be notified that we're gonna fill those slots, and you'll send us a schedule of their meetings and,
Yes, sir.
We'll get all that information.
okay.
Yeah, Mr.
I
Lamb.
think the
let them know.
hospital board actually meets the first week in February, so that's coming up.
It's
pretty
first
quick.
Thursday of every month.
Okay, all right. Yep.
Okay.
You can work out the details.
We got it.
You got it, okay. But if you would let both of those boards know, Mr. Lamb or whatever. Okay, and the only other thing, I made this note while I was here, I'd like to ask the staff to look into, I see when we have presentations like we had today, people straining to see what's going on. Could we investigate possibly putting two large screen TVs, 60, 72-inch, possibly on those flat walls out there so the public could see
Yeah, one
quite a
working
bit?
and one not.
How old are monitors?
How old are
Well,
evidently you
I will
kind of
say
realized
this
it like I did.
Was an item presented to the board at budget time.
I do know that, and after observing what I saw today, I think I would work hard to persuade the board for us to change our minds.
Very good.
Okay. All right.
I'll let IT know. I'm sure they're listening.
We'll look at that and have something, a report back on in February for you.
Okay. That okay with everybody? I know this one was working, that one wasn't working. I don't know what, there are two up front facing that way, are they not?
Facing out, yeah.
Out, yeah, which are the same size.
No, they're larger,
They're a little bit larger,
twice the
are they?
plus, yeah.
Okay.
They're,
Well, bring it back to us after you look into it a little bit. I don't think you need four. We're fine with what we got, I think. and nobody in the audience can really see these two. I've never quite understood the purpose of them.
I think they are beneficial for our presenters, but
Understood. Now you've answered the question, so just ignore what I said. I see what the purpose of them are. And if you can read that, those would probably be, I don't know, can you read that standing
no,
there?
no,
Only people-
absolutely not.
Only people with 20/0 vision.
Yeah,
No,
20-0.
this is the one I can read right here.
Yeah, and you might could even possibly put it there and serve all the purposes. I don't know, I won't get into that part of it.
Okay.
But I do think we need some improvement on that, particularly with the detail we had today. I think it would have been much nicer to do that. And, that's all I had on my list. Mr. Lamb, did you want to say something about a note there?
I just want to let everybody know that Janice has signed up Commissioner Leggett for the new commissioner school in Greenville, correct? Yeah. So she'll be attending that new school several days long. And then we'll also have a little orientation for her after she does that.
Mr. Durham, did you have anything?
No, I was just gonna tell the commissioners, since he didn't, that the county department heads had a retreat last week in Nags Head, and I thought it was an excellent retreat, and I look forward to getting Stacy's report.
Yeah. Do you have any comment on the retreat?
I would just comment that all the accommodations were provided free of charge, no cost to the county, probably less than $1,000 for food. So just in case any reporters in the room want to make sure they hear that.
Lundy, you caught up, sir?
And Robbie,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, Fred, Patsy, and I attended the legislative conference, and we did come up with the rules, the things that they're gonna do, but they have not got them together, and once they send them to me, I will make sure that the board gets a copy.
I think by now, commissioners probably know that the manager has been successful in employing a new county engineer.
That's correct.
You want to
Yeah,
say
I'll-
just a little bit about that?
Yes, I will be glad to. Actually, we had two hires. Adam Tyson, beginning March 1, will assume the role of planning director. And we were able to find a new engineer slash facilities slash public works director, and that will be, as has been in the paper, no, it hadn't fully been in the paper, Jonathan Boone will be assuming that position.
Which is not a lesser role than what he had.
No, he fixed it.
He did indeed. Anything else? If not, we determined we did not have a need for a closed session, so I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Outlaw, is there a second?
Second.
Y'all are normally more eager to leave than this. Have a second by Ms. Richardson first, I think. Any questions on the motion? All in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by a like sign? Stand adjourned. Thank y'all.